as a business leader, if you're not aware of or don't plan to bring your people with you on whatever change it is that you're making, it's going to be really hard to make that succeed.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
This special International Women's Day episode comes a little later than planned due to illness, but it's well worth the wait. Island influencer Vicki Hotchkiss comes from a long line of inspirational women and continues to break barriers for future generations. As the founder of Compass Strategy and a non-executive director for the Isle of Man Football Association, Vicki shares her personal and professional story from growing up in the Isle of Man and travelling the world to building an extensive career in financial services, project management and leadership. We explore her transition to entrepreneurship, what inspired her to launch Compass Strategy, and the challenges and opportunities for women in business and sports. She also discusses her role in driving gender diversity in football governance. Vicki offers powerful insights on the impact of mentorship and female role models in shaping careers, whilst tackling the broader economic and workforce challenges facing the Isle of Man. She shares a fresh perspective on wealth, success, and work-life balance, providing valuable advice for those navigating career transitions and personal growth. Enjoy this inspiring conversation with Vicki Hotchkiss in episode 126 of Island Influencers. Well, today I'm delighted to welcome Vicki Hotchkiss to the Island Influencers studio. Thank you so much for coming, Vicki.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sharon. Thank you so much for asking me.
Oh, it's so welcome. Well, we had an idea to do this podcast episode with a real focus on International Women's Day, which was very much suggested because my colleague heard you speak at the Institute of Directors. And in regards to your role as being a non-executive director of Isle of Man Football. So I wonder, without further ado, if you'd just let our listeners know, how did you get to where you are? Because I've had a preview of the things in your life, and what a fascinating story. So go, you.
Sure, no problem at all. So I'll start by saying that I was born in the Isle of Man, so I am local, very, very anchored to the island. My parents still live in the same house that my sister and I were raised in.
Oh, nice.
It is nice. I have very happy memories of my childhood here on the island. I went to Laxey Primary School, first of all, and then followed that at St Ninian's, where I played every sport you could imagine, really, really enjoyed it. My favourite subjects were English literature, and I still very much enjoy reading the classic literature, history and PE. And then after school, I went to university in Nottingham to study global politics, which was a hugely positive experience for me. The girl coming from the Isle of Man, we didn't travel much as a family when we were children. So moving from a small island into the big city was
big transition.
Big transition. Quite a scary one for me and my parents. I think they've talked about that since. It was a real eye opener, but I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I made a tremendous group of friends. Enjoyed the topics that I was studying.
Yeah.
Wrote my dissertation back in 2001 on Hillary Clinton running for the first female president of the United States, something which then happened, 20 years later.
Well, she ran for it, but she didn't get to.
She didn't,
unfortunately. But
no, she didn't get it, and we have still to see a female president of the United States. It seems
it's crazy,
odd
isn't
that
it?
they've not got there yet.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Well, hopefully they'll be enlightened one day. Yeah.
So after graduation, I took a year out and went to travel the world with two friends from university and a backpack. And we started off in India and landed in India about 3 weeks after 9/11. So it was a very different travel experience. I remember the conversations at home about whether we should still go or we shouldn't go.
Yeah, I
Quite
can
naturally,
imagine.
quite scary, but determined as ever. We went and we.
And why India?
Well, why not, Sharon? Really, there was no kind of firm plan. There was a route that we had earmarked, but we were young and free, and we had no responsibilities, so we had a one-way ticket around the world, and India seemed as good a place as any to make our first stop.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there's some really good experiences from that time we got there. I remember coming up to the Bureau de Change in the airport in Mumbai, and we had traveller's checks then, and handing over a traveller's checks for a very small amount of money, and the person behind the desk basically handed me back this absolute wedge of cash, huge pile of just notes, and then put a staple right through the middle of the whole thing. And looking at it and just going, what am I supposed to do with that? What? No idea. And the same thing happened to my friends as well. And we must have just looked so out of place in the airport. No idea what to do. That a lady came up to us who was very kind. Obviously, she was very experienced in travelling through this airport, and she advised us to put the money and our passport in our pants before we left to go through outside. And so we did.
And then when you needed to spend some money, it brings a whole new connotation to spending a penny, doesn't it?
It does. It really, really does.
Yeah.
So then the only thing we had to do was pay for a taxi,
Right.
to the hostel we were going to stay in, and then it sort of just stuck in our minds how different that arrival into India had been to perhaps arrival back into Ronaldsway in the Isle of Man.
Amazing. Gosh. So from India, where did you get to then?
So after India, we followed the sun, actually, and we went through Southeast Asia, so Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore. Ended up spending New Year in Australia, which was amazing.
Yeah.
And then kind of circled back round into America, and we did a little bit in Los Angeles, around a bit of tourist stuff around there, and then the final stop was Mexico, which was again just a fantastic place to end a trip. And I well, not just me, but me and the girls, we decided to come home, not because we felt we'd exhausted our travel desires, but because we ran out of money.
Yeah.
We had to come home and get jobs.
Yeah. I was going to say, I guess, did you self-fund? Had you had earnings from that?
Yeah, so
Jobs
didn't work when we were travelling. We were so lucky that we didn't need to do that.
Yeah.
But we had all worked in the summer holidays after graduation before going to save up the money that we would need to. Good for you for our spends when we were travelling. And it's not like going on holiday now. It was, we were students on a shoestring with a backpack, sleeping in dormitories and hostels and things like that. So very different experience to how I would like to travel there.
Yes, I know what you mean. Great. So what happened when you got back? You come straight back to the Isle of Man?
So I came straight home and was very firmly told by my parents to get a job. And quite rightly so. So I applied for a place on the graduate scheme with Abbey National, who had a base in the island at the time.
Yeah.
And was successful in that application. And part of that graduate rotation that they were doing, I found myself in the project management team and realised that I really enjoyed the world of projects. And so I applied for a permanent position as a trainee project manager and got the role and got on that programme. And I think it's one of the most valuable decisions that I've ever made, because those skills that I learned whilst training to be a project manager and doing those qualifications, I use almost every day in every job that I've had since.
That's really good to hear that. And I mean, similarly, Barclays, all the banks seem to have really amazing training programs back then. I don't know if they still do, but yeah, similarly, it's shaped mine and many other people I know, the amazing qualifications that it gave you and life skills, really. So
absolutely.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah, it was great. And at that time, Abbey National also had an office in Jersey, and I was in my very early 20s. I had no commitments, and so I could throw myself into the roles. And when the opportunity to take a role that was 1 week in the Isle of Man, 1 week in Jersey came up, I was first in the queue, and I lived that brilliant life for at least a year, travelling between the two sites and just really enjoying it.
With skill acquired living out of a backpack.
Yeah, absolutely. Although thankfully the backpack wasn't with me when I was there. I was travelling with work.
Yeah, very good. So you had a number of career changes throughout the years, as I was reading in your bio there. So what did you do with what you'd learnt at Abbey National?
So from Abbey, I went to Canada Life for the first time. They were based down in Castletown at that time.
Oh, I remember those days.
Yeah, and I joined there as their project manager, and I ran a number of projects for them over a 2-year period. And then an opportunity came up at Zurich, which was on Athol Street.
Yeah.
Then, and I moved to Zurich to be their project portfolio manager. So running the self-explanatory, running the portfolio of projects.
Yeah.
And so I started there just looking after the Isle of Man portfolio projects, and that went well. And so that got expanded to looking after Dublin as well. I did that for a little bit of time, and that went well as also. And so that was expanded to look after the full Asia Pacific Middle East region.
It's a massive global conglomerate, isn't it, really, Zurich?
Company, yeah. It's absolutely huge, and with that comes opportunities to take roles that are outside of the island. And I did, and I ended up spending 12 months in a role in Switzerland, so working for Zurich in Zurich, which is
excellent,
a pretty cool thing to say. And I
did you get skiing much?
We did. So my husband was in the Isle of Man, but he'd come for weekends, and we'd literally jump on a train and go skiing, and it was just a fantastic experience. There was no children then, so it was very easy for me to travel back and forth, and I enjoyed that job very, very much. And I've got a lot of respect for the Swiss, and I had real first-hand experience of their ability to just speak multiple languages at the drop of a hat. It was very, very impressive, and I don't think that we put enough emphasis on European languages, certainly in Britain. I think we assume that everyone speaks English.
Yeah, I think we're guilty of that a lot.
Yeah. And then I became pregnant with my first child. And whilst I was on maternity leave, it was very, very clear that the travelling to and from Switzerland was not going to work. It wasn't going to align with how I wanted to have a family. And so I left Zurich and I took a role back at Canada Life, who by good fortune had an opportunity that worked. So took a role back there, and they had moved up into the Isle of Man Business Park by that point. So I ran some projects for them and found myself naturally gravitating towards the people-focused projects, the culture changes and modernising ways of working. And then a vacancy came up in the Isle of Man team for a head of people, and I went for it. And I was 6 months pregnant with my second child when I got the job.
Amazing.
Which was really exciting. Really, really exciting.
How on earth did you juggle that?
Well, yeah, that was tricky.
I'm sure anyone's ever had a baby.
Exactly. So I took my full maternity leave entitlement, and Canada Life were hugely supportive. Through that time, we kept in touch and just got through it all together. And I was very happy to return to work and felt very welcomed back when I came back after maternity.
Yeah.
And then a little bit of time after that, an opportunity came up to take a head of talent and organisation development role for the UK division of Canada Life. So
that's a big role.
It was a really, really big role. So that was 5 locations supporting 1,500 people.
Yeah.
And so I took on that role, and then we almost immediately went into COVID lockdown, which was stressful for everybody, I think, in their own ways. But I remember that being one of the toughest times of my life so far, to balance a new role, have 2 small children at home, being in lockdown, in the house, and just all of those things put together. It was very, very difficult. And the same for many people, I think.
What did you learn about yourself from that?
It's a really good question, that, Sharon, actually. And what it made me realise is that you don't have to do everything. And so there was a point well into lockdown where I had to call it and say, I can't do all of this. And I had a really honest conversation with my boss at the time, actually, a brilliant man. He was very, very understanding. And I just had to reprioritise how to manage every day.
Well done for noticing and doing that. That's big.
It wasn't easy, but
no, but that's a really interesting and great way to look at it.
And then I stayed.
Wise words, that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's I kind of learned you can take these decisions and everything will still be okay.
We make it mean other things, don't we?
We do. And good news is it was still okay because we've all come out the other side.
We have.
And I stayed with Canada Life, and I did a couple of different things over the last year or so that I was there. And then I left in March last year.
Yeah.
To set up on my own.
How exciting.
It was. And so here we are. So there's a very long-winded way of how I've got from
not
the
at all.
It's to where we are now.
No, so it's nearly a year. By the time this podcast goes out, you'll have been in business with Compass Strategy for a year.
Well done. Almost. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Not everybody's got the courage to do that, and you have. So, well done for doing that.
Thank you.
I'm really interested to hear what you're doing in that. If you wouldn't mind, just let us know what that's all about.
Sure, of course, sir. I wanted to set up Compass to provide services to local Isle of Man based companies using the many years of experiences and skills that I've gained from the large institutions over the years. So these companies, they might not be big enough to warrant a full-time sort of business change HR director type role, or they don't want it, they don't need it, or some other companies might want to have that expertise and skill set on a very fractional basis as required to support their in-house teams. And so that is the service I provide, the service that I offer. And although in my head it started with supporting local businesses, I do actually have one or two clients that are not on the Isle of Man at the moment, which is equally good fun.
We proved we can work anywhere with COVID, can't we? So,
well, that was one of the advantages that came out of it. So I spend quite a lot of time still on Teams.
Yeah. I was going to say Teams or Zoom. Teams. Okay, so but I note that your business has two very different angles to it. It provides both HR and business change, which I suppose you tell me, with the massive changes that we're seeing with AI as a current example, does that impact greatly on the HR role, do you find?
Yeah, and I think
that's what it must.
It really, really does, Sharon. And the HR and business change thing has come about by circumstances, really, as opposed to being a conscious plan. And because they're the two fields that I've specialised in over my career, which may sound a bit random to some people, but actually business change or change of any description, it's so connected to the people that are in the middle of that change and the people that need to execute on that change, that actually the two fields of expertise are inherently linked.
Yeah. They say there's only two things certain in life, death and taxes. That's true. But I think there's also change.
Yeah, change. And everything changes, the world changes. And if we don't move, then it's not just about getting left behind anymore, is it? It's just things become less relevant. Yeah. If you don't, as a business leader, if you're not aware of or don't plan to bring your people with you on whatever change it is that you're making, it's going to be really hard to make that succeed.
Very poignant. Thank you. I'm really interested to know, though, in your role as Isle of Man Football Association non-executive director, how did you become involved in something like football when you very clearly said to me, I don't know anything about football. So
yeah, I'm the Ned, the football Ned that knows nothing about football. That was how I sort of pitched myself 12 months ago. And now I have to rephrase a little bit and say I'm the Ned that knows a little bit about football, having learned a lot over the last 12 months. Really interesting how that came about, actually. So the Football Association had an all-male board, and credit to that group that they'd recognised that they needed to modernise and they needed to evolve and move things forward in order, as we've just kind of talked about, really, to stay relevant, to keep moving in the right direction. And so they were looking to expand the skill sets that they had available to them on that board. And they did have gender parity targets that they were working towards. And through Canada Life, who are the primary sponsor of the local Premier League on the Isle of Man and the women's team, I'd already had a relationship with the Football Association. Right. And so which worked really well. So when I was able to apply and talk about the role, we already knew each other. And I think relationships are always really important.
No, they are, absolutely. So what challenges did you really have?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been on the
apart from learning about football.
So I had to learn about football, but I still couldn't tell you what the offside rule is, which no one wants me to try and do that. But it was interesting because for the first few months, I think I was the only female on the board, and the balance is now something like 60-40, which is a great indicator of how far we're progressing.
Yeah, it's a good move to travel.
But the challenges that we face are not really because I'm female, certainly at board level, so I don't feel that way at all. Everybody around that table has the same interest in it. It's to do the best that we can for local football. How we do that is where the challenges come in, and we have some very robust discussions around the boardroom table as to what might work and might not work. I imagine much the same as most boards are there to throw the ideas around. I don't feel that my being female has made me any less respected or influential.
That's good to hear.
On the board at all. I think the board is actually made up of a number of very, very skilled individuals.
Oh, that's super. Sounds like a good balance. So what barriers exist for women still in football, would you say, and needs to change to truly level the playing fields for both opportunities and representation? It's interesting, isn't it? There's certain sports, and football springs to mind. Just, you just look at the UK.
Yeah. And it's come such a long way, Sharon. So in the 1920s, the FA, the English FA, banned women from playing football, which you think is just unheard of now, really.
Yes.
And more interestingly, I think, is that ban wasn't lifted until 1970.
Amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it wasn't against the law for women to play football. They just couldn't play professional football or, affiliated football or anything like that. So thankfully, those days are long gone. I think the challenges that women and girls face in football now are much more systemic, much more nuanced, the same as in sort of any sort of commercial organisation, I think. One of the first big pieces of work I directed for the Isle of Man FA was to survey the local football community so that we could listen and understand what is going on outside of the boardroom and use that information to feed in our new business strategy for the next 4 years. And one of our strategic priorities is to increase participation levels of women and girls in all aspects of the sport. So playing, coaching, refereeing, spectating. So in every
interesting
every aspect.
And was it also focused on the grassroots development to elite pathways? Was that included, or?
Yeah, so we talked about what's available for women and the girls right from a young age and all the way through, and what we found from the results of that survey is that men and women experience the same thing quite differently, which is interesting. So, for example, we asked the question, are there or do you believe there are barriers to women and girls from enjoying football on the Isle of Man? And I think 3/4 of the female respondents answered yes, compared to a handful of the male respondents
Who asked that same question?
who asked the same question.
Oh, yeah.
And
Perception is reality.
perception and reality, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then when we dug in a little bit further to that, I think it was something really big response rate, Sharon, like 80+% of women and girls cited that changing room facilities, toilets, were a problem. Whereas something like, 16% of men said that the quality of the toilets were below par. Mm-hmm. So just things like that. So when I'm sort of talking about barriers and challenges for women in sport, it's not that the law bans us from playing these days. It's that there are different detail that needs to be looked at in order to make it available to everybody.
Sounds like relatively simple fixes in some respects.
Well, you'd think so. Yeah, you would say.
Yeah. Oh, well, that sounds very promising. So do you think the rise of women's football can inspire more women to take on leadership roles, not just in sports, but in traditionally male-dominated fields overall?
Yes, I do. I really do. And I think visibility and seeing female role models taking part in what might be traditionally male-dominated sports or career paths gives other women and girls a vision that they can look up to. I think the key for me, though, is the realization that diversity of thought around a table or in a team is valuable. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's commercially advantageous to bring different perspectives and opinions in. I don't think gender diversity is about setting targets and ticking boxes. I think that is the wrong way to look at it.
Quite.
I think if your organisation or the way that you make your money comes from selling or providing a service to the full population, then it makes obvious commercial sense to me to have a board or a leadership team that represents that. And
yeah.
And I know it sounds so obvious when we say it, Sharon. Does it sound so obvious? In the Isle of Man, our population is still pretty much 50-50, like 49-51 or something like that. So it makes sense to me. I know.
So what challenges are you seeing for women in employment in the Isle of Man?
So I get asked this question quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear your answer.
And it's something that I do feel quite passionate about. And the data's there, and it tells us that men and women are pretty equally matched in the early years of their chosen careers. And I mean that in terms of pay, promotion, choice, that sort of thing. Disparities start to emerge when women are seen to be of childbearing age or when they choose to have children. And I think the choices that parents have to make after the arrival of children is hugely impactful on female career progression and the future financial security of women in general.
Yeah, so you mentioned that with your case, when you went back after your second child, you didn't experience that. You had a great employer who understood you, supported you.
That's true.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? You know, that's a kind of an observation. They didn't happen to you.
No, that didn't happen to me. I felt very supported.
Yeah.
But I also felt very capable of going for those roles. So I didn't want a parent to stop me giving it a go.
Yeah.
And that's by no means to say that it wasn't difficult. No, it wasn't difficult. Holding down big responsible jobs and having young children is challenging, and you have to find a way to balance that in the best way that you can. But from an employer perspective, I was very supportive. Very supported the whole way through.
It sounds like there's learning points all over the place here for
there is.
There are both parties, isn't it? Yeah. No, it's interesting.
It is interesting, and I note to look at something that's quite topical at the moment in the new budget announcements or the new employment legislation bill that's coming into force in April. Shared parental leave has been dropped off the, I don't know what the word is, but it won't be going ahead.
That's Isle of Man.
In the Isle of Man.
That seems a bit backwards.
It does. And so you look back, and shared parental leave was in the early mootings of this legislation. There was definitely still talk about it last year, but for whatever reason, it's not on the agenda to come into force this.
Well, if any listeners know why, maybe they could let us know.
Maybe they could let us know. But for me, gender parity, or having the equality of choice, is key to financial growth of the island.
I agree. Yeah.
And so it seems short-sighted to me.
It does.
That's just disappeared off the radar.
It does. In our sector, in the Chartered Insurance Institute, they commissioned a piece of work about 6 or 7 years ago called Ensuring Women's Futures, and it was all about these moments that matter in career progression. And the biggest indicator of getting it wrong is the relative size of pension pots at retirement age based on women who have been given less career opportunities, having children, doing caring responsibilities, and yet women end up at this retirement point with a lower pension pot than their male counterpart, and yet their life expectation is far greater.
Exactly. It's something that I see, Sharon, and it's I don't know exactly how we solve that problem, but it's definitely something that we can't ignore.
No. So have you got any female role models or mentors that's inspired you in your life? I think it's really good to ask you that. There's certainly we're celebrating International Women's Day, which sounds like we deserve more than a day, but hey.
It does, doesn't it? And do you know, I'm glad you asked, because I really feel that I do. I come from a long list of inspirational women. I have a memory of my late maternal grandmother and the story that she told me as a teenager about learning to drive. And she said that when she expressed an interest in learning to drive, she was very firmly told by her own husband that, you know, ladies didn't drive. You don't need to drive, you can't do it. That kind of narrative. And so she went off in secret and learned to drive and passed a test and then just drove home. So ladies can drive. After all, I thought I was very, very determined.
Yeah.
My great aunt, she went to Cambridge to study in the late 1940s. And I mean, that was a time when not very many women at all.
What did you do?
Went to university. My paternal grandmother, she received an MBE from the late Queen Elizabeth for the work that she did over the years in the field of prisoner rehabilitation on the Isle of Man.
You could tell you were going to be a high achiever from very early ages with those two women in your life.
And then my aunt, she received an OBE for championing the contributions that women play in the armed forces. And she is a leading voice in a group called Women in Defence.
Wow.
And then most recently, my mum has received a British Empire Medal for the many years of work that she's done for a local cancer charity. So I am blessed with a huge range of very, very inspirational and high-achieving women.
Oh, that's really awesome.
Well, it is, but I feel the pressure, Sharon. I would too, my goodness, to raise my game.
But no, fortunately, I think you're in on a good track. So, I mean, those are really great things. So thanks for playing today and talking about those specific points that we thought to discuss today. But if it's okay with you, I'd just like to ask you what I ask all guests is what's your earliest memories of money?
I was prepared for this question, Sharon, having listened to the podcasts for a while now, and you ask all of your guests, and I was thinking
it's such an interesting topic to our lives that it surrounds everything, doesn't it? Money, yeah. And yet we're not given the basic lessons in the how-to, unless they come from at home. So
exactly, and when I started to think about this, that's exactly where my first memories and lessons of money came from. Were from home. So my parents chose quite a traditional route when my sister and I were young. So my dad runs his own business, and he went out to work every day, and my mum stayed at home to look after us and run the house. And I have very, very clear memories of both parents instilling the importance of working hard in whatever you choose to do, and saving your money from a young age. At birthdays and Christmas, my sister and I, we were drilled with the spend half, save half philosophy of whatever we were gifted at those times. And
just think how set we'd be in life if we followed those rules.
But I know, imagine. I don't think I'm quite as good as that now. But yeah, that was the mantra. Borrowing money or being in debt was a big no in our house. And as soon as I was old enough, I was told to get out and get a Saturday job, which I did, and then I carried that through school holidays when I was old enough to do so.
Saved up to go backpacking?
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, when I was at the end of sixth form, I remember my girlfriends and we were talking about that, that rite of passage, the end of sixth form for university.
Tell me about it. My son's about to go off and do his
2-week holidays.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, and we were all planning to go to Tenerife for 2 weeks, and I was absolutely determined I was going to pay for this myself. I was so grown up. I was 18. I'd finished school. I was going to pay for the whole thing myself.
Good for you.
And I worked in school holidays, and I worked at weekends, and I put my money towards the holiday fund. But as it got nearer at the time, it became pretty clear that it was never going to be enough. And that was a bit of an early lesson to me on how much it costs to go on holiday. And I remember sort of sitting down with mum and dad at the table, and they must have known already what I was going to say, and sort of saying, I just don't have the money. And we agreed that if I got the A-level results that I wanted, then they would match whatever I had saved. Which was really, really brilliant. Yeah,
good incentive.
It was a really good incentive to save as much as I could, but also to study hard and get the A-level.
Tally off and watch.
And get the A-levels that I needed.
Oh, well done. Great. And what about, we always talk about being wealthy or rich. What do those sort of mean? What do they mean to you now, those words?
So I think what I would view as being rich or wealthy has evolved as I've matured and over the years. When I was younger, I used to think about being rich. When you're young and you start out, I didn't have any money, and I was like, being rich is about earning loads of money, being able to buy what I want. And so I worked really hard, loads of hours, and I chased the dollar, as the saying goes. And I think still working hard is important, and still having the ability to earn your own money is important. But now I look at it through a different lens, and I don't think the external presentation of that is something that I value anymore. And it's definitely not top of the list. For me, what sort of life always comes back to, I think, is the health and safety of my children is the number one priority, and our ability to provide them with a stable and loving home. And my husband and I, we consciously balance our working days so that we eat together as a family at least once a day, so breakfast or dinner.
That's great to do.
And it's wonderful.
So important.
It's so important to have that family time. And I think if I reflect on what being wealthy or having a rich life means to be now, it's, yes, I've been successful in my career. I'm financially comfortable, but I have healthy, happy children, a wonderful husband, and all my extended family are healthy, happy, and touch wood, I think is the right thing to do. And I think that for me is the most important thing.
Super. Thank you. That's so. Yeah, I think you were very wise. Those are wise words. Yeah. And what about your 18-year-old self? What would you tell? What would you have told her? What would you tell her?
So, looking back, there's definitely those cringe moments, are there? When you look back at your 18-year-old self and you think, oh, yeah, I would have done that differently. But in reality, who I am today is stood on the shoulders of that 18-year-old me. And I'm very much someone who thinks you learn from mistakes and you find ways forward. You keep moving forward. I don't think it doesn't do anyone too good to dwell on what may have been embarrassing in the past, or you would have done things differently. So I don't think I'd do anything to advise my 18-year-old self differently, but I would probably, if I had the opportunity, point her in the direction of products for curly hair, which would have saved her a lot of frizz and anxiety in those teenage years.
It's got wonderful curly hair, by the way, for the benefit of our listeners. And what do you do to relax?
We have just actually come back from a ski holiday with some family and some good friends. And I find skiing to be the most amazing mental relaxation that you can.
So you didn't go in half term, were you?
No, we didn't. We avoid at all costs. Yeah. So yeah, we went in mid-January, and I came back from that holiday just feeling both mentally and physically refreshed and ready to take on the coming year. But I do recognise that you can't do that all of the time. So on a more day-to-day basis, I get up. I'm an early riser. I like to get up early, and I will work out or practice some yoga in the morning before the children get up. I feel that I've set my day up well if I do that. Once the children are up,
does that mean you go to bed early then?
Yeah, I am. I'm an early to bed, early riser by preference.
Yeah,
type person.
What do you call early?
So I normally look to be going to bed around 10, and I get up. The alarm will go off at 6 in the morning.
Yeah, very good. Best trip ever taken?
So there's a number of things that spring to mind here. So the last big family holiday I went on with my sister and my parents was the trip we took to Disney World in Florida when I was 17, and I've just got such fond memories of that time, and that trip was absolutely brilliant.
I love Disney.
No, it was great. It really was great. Before Mark and I had our children, we spent a good 2 weeks in Japan, which was
wonderful,
fantastic experience.
Which parts did you get to?
No, that's a big mental test, that, Sharon. So
okay,
Tokyo, Hiroshima, and a number of other places that I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm reading a book at the moment. It's called My Life in Japan. It's a school teacher up there. It's fascinating, unputdownable.
It was brilliant.
Yeah.
And then my son actually said something a couple of weeks ago where he said his favourite holiday in his 9 years of life so far is when we go glamping at Glen Helen, which is absolutely brilliant. And I just think, well, that's wonderful for all of the ski trips you've been on and everything else. But glamping at Glen Helen is what he's valued.
But let's face it, clumping along in ski boots is not fun for even a 9-year-old, is it?
Yeah, it's not. But just to mention one other bit that was just been really memorable in my life is in December 2024, just a once-in-a-lifetime experience of being invited to Buckingham Palace to watch my dad receive an MBE from Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal.
Oh my God, what a fan.
I know, just to add to the list. Yeah, to add to the list and the pressures. But that was just a fantastic experience. Mum, Dad and my sister, we went together to do that.
What a family. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh. Best things about living on the Isle of Man, Vicky, what would you say?
Quality of life. Number one, I think, for me, the close proximity of family, the ease at which we can spend time with friends. My children go to an absolutely fantastic primary school where there's really high educational standards, which I actually think translates across the island, not just their one primary school. So many extracurricular activities for the children to get stuck into, and for adults on the island as well. Mark and I, we walk the children to school every morning, and I honestly think that's a privilege, and I will miss that when they no longer require it.
Yeah, it's a part of your heart that misses that. I have been through that. Yeah.
Oh,
I know. Yeah.
So I think the island offers so many
every sort of transition that gets a little bit further away. It's at primary school, then it's secondary school, then it's university.
I know. But right now, that's part of the daily routine here.
Yeah, nice. Well, that's good to hear. Okay. Isle of Man challenges and threats. What would you say?
So there's a quote for me that sticks out from President Clinton's campaign.
The one that made it as president.
Yeah, so President Bill Clinton's campaign from the 1992 election in America. And the quote was, "It's the economy, stupid." And I agree with that. I think if the economy is working, everything else falls into place. I think the island needs as many people in paid work as possible, and the majority of those need to be in the private sector. I think the island's economically active population is about half of the actual population. And I don't believe that's enough to sustain our way of living, to sustain our national insurance fund, the state pensions, to put the money into the NHS that we need to have a healthy and vibrant society. And I think as the average life expectancy increases on the island, which is a good thing, right? Everyone's healthy, everyone's living longer. The demand on state services like the NHS and the pension scheme, etc., just increases. And I think it's a huge challenge for the island on how we address that, because it can't stay as it is.
Okay.
Any for too much longer, I don't think.
So can you speak to any solutions or opportunities that you would see?
So I recognise it's my personal view, but I think we need to have a shift much more towards personal responsibility, rather than full reliance on the state. You could look at other countries for the different models that they have of looking after and caring for their populations, different ways of doing things, that I think we should consider. I think we've already talked about, Sharon, the need for sort of gender parity being a key lever for economic prosperity. We talked about it just before. I think there's things there that we need to look at. But for me, the driving, what we need to drive towards is a much more fruitful economy that's in growth and is delivering outcomes that service the island as a whole.
Moving quickly on to some more fun aspects of the podcast. So any books that you've read or TV shows or anything that you'd want to say just to inspire our audience?
Yeah, so I last year I read a book called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed, and it was absolutely brilliant.
It's good. He's great, isn't he? I like Matthew Syed.
I also just finished a book called Babel by R.F. Kuhn, which is fiction, and it's about different views of British imperialism, which sounds a bit heavy, but it was really well written. Okay. I really enjoyed it.
Good. I'll look at that one.
TV shows. My husband and I have just finished watching Slow Horses.
Isn't it brilliant?
It's absolutely brilliant. So strong recommendation there for anyone that's not seen Slow Horses. It's really, really good.
Did you see the first episode where it was in an airport?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
It's worth watching that
just for that.
Yeah, it is, because it really launched them off well. It was all done during lockdown.
Oh, really? Because I did say, sat on the sofa with Mark saying, I wonder how they filmed that in a really busy airport during lockdown.
It was Stansted for the airport shots, and then this is according to Marina Hyde on The Rest is Entertainment with Richard Osman. It was also done at the Wembley Stadium, certain points of the tickets.
Okay.
Yeah, the security and all the guards and stuff were all on proper duty that day. So.
Oh, right. Okay, that is interesting. Then a bit of fandom.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Any other TV shows?
The Day of the Jackal was brilliant.
Oh, it was good.
With Eddie Redmayne. That was really good. We watched that recently.
Did you want him to escape at the end?
Oh, it was mixed emotions.
It
was very conflicted. He played the character superbly.
Yeah, he did. So we're not telling you what happened, by the way.
No.
Worth a watch. Quotes? Favourite quote?
I always like Einstein's definition of insanity. That's always a good one. Gets rolled out quite a lot. But my favourite quote is by Theodore Roosevelt, actually. And it's, at any moment of decision, the worst that you can do is nothing. And that really resonates for me.
That's pretty special. Yeah. Okay. So finally, where can we go to learn more about you and what you're doing? What sort of is your favourite social media connection? And
so I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there, and also via the Compass Strategy website, which is compass-strategy.com.
Okay, we'll put those in the show notes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, well, listen, thank you so much for coming on today and being a good sport and answering all about the International Women's Day questions. That's so good to hear, and good luck in everything you're doing, and keep on doing what you're doing. I look forward to seeing all about you in the next New Year's Honours list, or one not too far from now.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Sharon. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening this far. I hope you found this episode to be valuable. If so, I'd like to ask you for a small favour. Would you please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review, because that's one of the best ways for others to find the series, and please send a link to the podcast to 3 friends or colleagues who know they'll find it helpful. That way we can spread the word about how great a place the Isle of Man is to live and work, and help spread some positivity. Thanks again for tuning in and being part of our great community. I'll see you next time. Island Influencers is a fortnightly podcast. Make sure you don't miss the next episode by clicking the follow button on your podcast platform. A big thanks to the producer Catherine Watts from Social Cues and editor Martin Bamford at Bear Content, and thank you for listening.